those things which cannot be seen. Pay attention even to trifles. Do nothing which is of no use. It is important to start by setting these broad principles in your hearts and train in the way of strategy. If you do not look at these things on a large scale, it will be difficult for you to master strategy. If you learn and attain this strategy, you will never lose, even to 20 or 30 enemies. More than anything, to start with, you must set your heart on strategy and earnestly stick to the way. You will come to be able to actually beat men in fights and be able to win with your eye. Also, by training, you will be able to freely control your own body, conquer men with your body, and with sufficient training, you will be able to beat 10 men with your spirit. When you have reached this point, will it not mean that you are invincible? Moreover, in large-scale strategy, the superior man will manage many subordinates dexterously, bear himself correctly, govern the country and foster the people, thus preserving the ruler's discipline. If there is a way involving the spirit of not being defeated, to help oneself and gain honor, it is the way of strategy. The second year of Shōhō, 1645. The 5th month, the 12th day. Shinmen Musashi. The Water Book. The spirit of Niten Ichi school of strategy is based on water, and this water book explains methods of victory as the longsword form of the Ichi school. Language does not extend to explaining the way in detail, but it can be grasped intuitively. Study this book. Read a word, then ponder on it. If you interpret the meaning loosely, you will mistake the way. The principles of strategy are written down here in terms of single combat, but you must think broadly so that you can attain an understanding for 10,000-a-side battles. Strategy is different from other things in that if you mistake the way even a little, you will become bewildered and fall into bad ways. If you merely read this book, you will not reach the way of strategy. Absorb the things written in this book. Do not just read, memorize, or imitate, but so that you realize the principle from within your own heart, study hard to absorb these things into your body. Spiritual bearing in strategy. In strategy, your spiritual bearing must not be any different from normal. Both in fighting and in everyday life, you should be determined, though calm. Meet the situation without tenseness, yet not recklessly, your spirit settled, yet unbiased. Even when your spirit is calm, do not let your body relax, and when your body is relaxed, do not let your spirit slacken. Do not let your spirit be influenced by your body, or your body influenced by your spirit. Be neither insufficiently spirited nor over-spirited. An elevated spirit is weak, and a low spirit is weak. Do not let the enemy see your spirit. Small people must be completely familiar with the spirit of large people, and large people must be familiar with the spirit of small people. Whatever your size, do not be misled by the reactions of your own body. With your spirit open and unconstricted, look at things from a high point of view. You must cultivate your wisdom and spirit. Polish your wisdom. Learn public justice. Distinguish between good and evil. Study the ways of different arts one by one. When you cannot be deceived by men, you will have realized the wisdom of strategy. Stance in strategy.
So is that a wooden sword?
Adopt a stance with the head erect, neither hanging down nor looking up, nor twisted.
I got it.
Your forehead and the space between your eyes should not be wrinkled.
Did you buy it?
Do not roll your eyes, nor allow them to blink.
No,
But
with my
slightly
money,
narrow.
Dad.
Okay.
I bought it
With
with my
your
money.
features composed, Keep the line of your nose straight with a feeling of
50
slightly
bucks?
flaring your
Huh?
nostrils.
$50.
Hold the line of the rear of your neck straight.
Yeah, no, it's worth more.
Instill vigor into your hairline,
Yeah.
and in the same way from the shoulders down through your entire body. Lower both shoulders, and without the buttocks jutting out, put strength into your legs from the knees to the tops of your toes. Brace your abdomen so that you do not bend at the hips. Wedge your companion's sword in your belt against your abdomen, so that your belt is not slack. This is called wedging in. In all forms of strategy, it is necessary to maintain the combat stance in everyday life, and to make your
that's
everyday
true.
stance
Bouncers
your
teach
combat stance.
Yeah, combat
You must
stance and
research this
bouncing.
well.
Through communication.
The gaze in strategy. The gaze should be large and broad. This
You
is the
don't care about
twofold
this kind of shit,
gaze,
though. You don't-
perception and sight.
Yeah.
Perception is strong, and sight weak. In strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close, and to take a distance view of close things. It is important in strategy to know the
Yeah, this
enemy's
is something I'll
sword
listen to while
and not to be
driving.
distracted by
It's a 5 rings.
insignificant
I've read
movements of
it.
his sword. You must study this. The
It's all-
gaze is the
it
same
goes to
for
this thing
single
about the dark
combat
times,
and for
and it's all about
large-scale
time.
combat.
Time.
It is necessary in strategy to be able to look to both sides without moving the eyeballs.
Time
You
is a
cannot
big
master
aspect
this
of all
ability
this
quickly. Learn what
Yeah,
is
the guy, this is
written
the
here.
written book of an
Use
actual
this
samurai
gaze in
warrior.
everyday
who-
life.
He wrote it to
Do not
his-
vary it,
his-
whatever
his
happens.
dying.
Back in ancient
Yeah,
times.
feudal Japan.
Holding
yeah,
the
1480 or
longsword.
whatever.
Grip the longsword with a rather floating feeling in your thumb and forefinger, with the middle finger neither tight nor slack, and with the last two fingers tight. It is bad to
It's
have
like,
clay
he
in
had
hands.
like a golf grip.
When you take up
for
a sword, you must feel intent on cutting the enemy. As you cut an enemy, you must not change your grip, and your hands must not cower. When you dash the enemy's sword aside or ward it off, or force it down, you must slightly change the feeling in your thumb and forefinger. Above all, you must be intent on cutting the enemy in the way you grip the sword. The grip for combat and for sword testing is the same. There is no such thing as a man-cutting grip. Generally, I dislike fixedness in both long swords and hands. Fixedness means a dead hand. Pliability is a living hand. You must bear
Bruce
this
Lee
in
taught
mind.
that with all martial arts. It's crazy.
Footwork.
Bruce Lee did. He
With the
taught
tips
that
of your
with all
toes
martial
somewhat
art
flat.
aspects.
Tread
But
firmly
he's
with your
talking about
heels.
this with sword grip.
Whether you move fast or
Free
slow,
flowing's
with
better
large
than
or
a
small steps,
standard
your
stable
feet must
grip
always
at the top
move
of the
as in
sword.
normal walking. I dislike the three walking methods known as jumping foot, floating foot, and fixed steps. So-called yin-yang foot is important to the way. Yin-yang foot
No
means
way.
not moving only
Yeah,
one.
they do. You ever hear
Means
that?
moving your feet left, right, and right, left when cutting, withdrawing, or warding off a cut.
This is where it came
You should
from,
not move
five
one
rings.
foot, preferentially.
The book of the 5 rings. It's real good.
The 5
Yeah, the 5
attitudes.
rings.
The 5 attitudes are upper, middle, lower, right side, and left side. These are the 5. Although attitude has these 5 dimensions, the one purpose of all of them is to cut the enemy. There are none but these 5 attitudes.
Processed food. I want to make my own food.
Whatever attitude you are in,
No.
do not be conscious of making the
Everything we
attitude.
have is all processed
Think only of
bullshit
cutting.
food.
Yeah, that's because I.
Your attitude should be large
Yeah,
or
I
small
know.
according to the situation.
That's why I asked.
Upper, lower, and middle attitudes are decisive. Left
I
and
know. I'm
right
thinking
side
I'm gonna
attitudes
start making
are fluid.
sandwiches with those baguettes.
Left and right
Yes.
attitudes should be used if there is an obstruction overhead or to one side.
I'll get tired.
The
of
decision
sandwiches
to
real
use
quick,
left
though,
or
but yeah, at
right
least you can make
depends
it
on the
yourself.
phase.
Amazing, though.
Yeah.
The essence of the way is this. To understand attitude, you must thoroughly understand the middle attitude. The middle attitude is the heart of the attitudes. If we look at strategy on a broad scale, the middle attitude is the seat of the commander, with the other 4 attitudes following the commander. You must
wow.
appreciate this.
Yeah. I see that.
The way of the longsword.
I do. That's like Kelly. You know,
Knowing the way of the longsword
he's-
means we can wield with
he
two
is the
fingers the
merchant,
sword
the
that we usually
communicator, and
carry.
all these things.
If we know the path of the
and
sword
families.
well, we
He
can
knows
wield
the
it
family in
easily.
this.
If you try to wield the longsword quickly, you will mistake the way. To wield the longsword well, you must wield it calmly. If you try to wield it quickly, like a folding fan or a short sword, you will err by using short sword chopping.
Yeah.
You cannot cut a man with a longsword using this method. When you have cut downwards with the longsword,
That's what
lift it straight
my
upwards.
downwards
You have
and
cut
up.
sideways,
You have to go left or
return the
left or
sword
right. You have
along
to
the
cut
sideways
somewhere.
path. Return the sword in a reasonable way,
Yeah.
always stretching the
That's
elbows
awesome.
broadly. Wield the sword strongly. This is the way of the longsword. If you learn to use the 5 approaches of my strategy, you will be able to wield a sword well. You must train constantly. The 5 approaches. The first approach is the middle attitude. Confront the enemy with the point of your sword against his face. When he attacks, dash the sword to the right and ride it. Or, when the enemy attacks, deflect the point of his sword by hitting downwards. Keep your longsword where it is, and as the enemy renews the attack, cut his arms from below.
Yeah.
This
Up,
is the first method.
down, up. That's great.
The 5 approaches are this kind of thing. You must train repeatedly using a longsword in order to learn them. When you master my way of the longsword, you will be able to control any attack the enemy makes. I assure you, there are no attitudes other than the 5 attitudes of the longsword of Ni To. In the second approach with the longsword, from the upper attitude, cut the enemy just as he attacks. If the enemy evades the cut, keep your sword where it is, and, scooping from below, cut him as he renews the attack. It is possible to repeat the cut from here. In this method, there are various changes in timing and spirit. You will be able to understand this by training in the Ichi school.
Yeah.
You will always win with the 5 longsword methods. You must train repeatedly. In the third approach, adopt the lower attitude, anticipating scooping up. When the enemy attacks, hit his hands from below. As you do so, he may try to hit your sword down. If this is the case, cut his upper arms horizontally with a feeling of crossing. This means that from the lower attitudes you hit the enemy at the instant that he attacks. You encounter this method often, both as a beginner and in later strategy. You must train holding a longsword.